My topic was human trafficking, and so I found this picture, the illegal trade of humans against their will for the purpose of sexual exploitation, forced labor, or modern day slavery. Obviously that is human trafficking. I found this first quote through the book that I did, which is The Good News About Injustice, which was a really interesting book, if I do say so myself. But, so, courage is not simply one of the virtues, but the form of every virtue at its testing point, which means at the point of highest reality. A chastity or honesty or mercy which yields to danger will be chaste or honest or merciful only on conditions. Pilate was merciful till it became too risky. And I think this is interesting, and I think it translates into, I think it's the same way with love. So in the same way, love that is only experienced through certain conditions will only be conditional love. So going into this Bible, I chose John 13:34. A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you, so that you must love one another. And I thought this goes into this quote before in the thing of love, in the sense that God showed us unconditional love. He didn't show us love on condition. He didn't show us, I'll love this person over here because they like me, but he showed us unconditional love. Even though we were sinners, he gave his son. But for this, I thought this was this picture that you see right there was interesting, and it also goes into the video that I'm planning on showing. Is that slavery was abolished 150 years ago, yet there are more people that are in slavery today than at any time in our history. And some could argue that our world naturally expands in population, and there could be explanations for that. But the simple fact that that statement is true it's too bad, to be honest. Okay, and then
Shows at the wedding tomorrow. Filming a bachelor party ever amounting to anything good.
That's not a That's up here on the right. Hey, up here on the right.
Where do the high school girls hang out?
I can show it to Sarah later, right?
The single most lucrative commercial enterprise in the world.
The fastest growing crime on the planet.
Yeah, girl. Hey, we're gonna get shot. Boys, welcome.
It's a reality.
You're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars.
This is not a lifestyle choice.
It'll be as long as you want to make it, you know.
We live in a world where we don't necessarily know what's going on next door.
Yeah.
I don't even know where we are.
Oh yeah. It's a serious massage.
If you're not seeing it, you're not looking for it.
What kind of place is this?
It's everywhere.
It's not even light out.
This one here? Yeah,
They live under constant threat of violence, under constant threat or actual sexual abuse. They are given only enough food to sustain them.
That's when I started to sing. I said our death brings life unto us. Passion not for me. Sunsetting on to breeze. Sound is moving like a ball. Let's keep hearing that melody. Check the radio. Nothing's playing. Check the radio again, but there's nothing playing. Moonlight illuminate my night and my day. Sun may make the people say.
I remember in particular one girl who was crying as she told her testimony. She wasn't crying because she had been forced into the sex trade. She wasn't crying because she had been beaten and raped. She wasn't crying because she'd been stripped naked and chained. She wasn't crying because her so-called parents had shoved a baton down her throat to get her to die. She was crying because after her rehabilitation, which was coming to an end, she had nowhere else to go other than to return to those parents.
Chariots of flame change my name now. One's always the same. So the money what you find when you climb. And shut the radio again.
There are 12-year-old girls, 15-year-old girls who had been kidnapped and their virginity was being sold to the highest bidder. You can do that now? Good.
Blast off onto the moon. But you might get caught in a temple of doom. You might get caught in a temple of doom and say, moonlight illuminate my night. By day sun rays make the people say.
For instance, in the sex industry, what makes slavery modern there is AIDS. You have a timeline on how long you can use a human being. And then when they're done, you just find them.
During the transatlantic slave trade, the value of a young male agricultural worker on U.S. soil was an equivalent of $40,000 today. You can buy that same young male agricultural worker on U.S. soil for about $300 today.
Don't forget, justice is what love looks like in public.
It's time for the world to focus on acknowledging that slavery still exists. It's never gone away. But we put people on the moon. We have dolphin-friendly Junior. Why can't we do the same for kids and people?
Okay. I thought that video was powerful in the sense that oftentimes when we say human trafficking, at least for me, I think of sex trade. And I think that video really depicts the fact that it comes in all shapes and forms. It comes in all kinds of different ways of life. It affects areas that we typically don't think about, or maybe we just brush off. But I think it also goes into, my book kind of talks about this. It talks about the invisible children thing, human soldiers, in the first little bit of the book. And it talks about how the individual writing the book was helping out, doing as much as he could. He took that information and wrote this book. But in his findings, his job was to go to the genocide fields of Rwanda and all that, chaos and look through the bodies and find evidence of their murderer, basically. Find out who exactly could have done this, which they were building a case against the Tutsis, which were the murderers. But the fact that I wanted to point out was in his book he describes the issue he found out in his looking through all these bodies, a natural human reaction to having to do something like that and having to deal with looking at human bodies, thousands of bodies daily, if not more. A natural reaction would be to try to almost dehumanize it, in the sense that if I think of these people as a statistic, maybe, and you might not even be doing it consciously, and that's what he said, in the sense that I have to try to humanize them again. It wasn't I was trying to dehumanize them, it was I'm trying to humanize them again. So the natural reaction to such a thing is terrible, in the sense that you're dehumanizing someone to deal with the pain. And he pointed out the issue that to conquer struggles like this is to humanize them again, so we can sympathize and we can understand that each body is a person. But another quote that I wanted to go across is Romans 12:9-13. Love must be sincere, hate what is evil, cling to what is good, be devoted to one another in brotherly love, honor one above yourselves, never be lacking in zeal, but keep yourself spiritually fervor. Keep your spiritual fervor, serve the Lord, be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer, share with God's people who are in need, practice hospitality. Okay, basically the point I wanted to get across is God calls us to an all-encompassing love. This love, and then, as it says, love is the enactment and fulfillment of God's law. I think that is extremely important, especially to us as Christians, because asking God into our hearts is only the beginning. Establishing the unconditional love that he calls us to is, as it said, the fulfillment of his desire for us, and is the solution to human trafficking. Is as simple and as complex as love. Again, for dehumanizing, this quote I wanted to do, and this quote is from the book that I read. In truth, each body, now dull and limp in the mud, was actually a unique bearer of the very image of God, a unique creation of the divine maker, individually knit within a mother's womb by the Lord of the universe. And I wanted to include this simply to just make, in the chapter and the passages surrounding this quote, it was all about making them real, humanizing them again, making each body, each person, a person. Because only then can we really start to deal with the actual problem of human trafficking. Okay, and then I interviewed 3 different individuals, and it was really interesting because each individual presented a different side to human trafficking, and I thought that it was interesting because it showed me how huge. It helped to emphasize how huge human trafficking really was and what it goes into. But for this first person I interviewed, Cindy Cunningham, she gave me a really textbook depiction of it that we often learn. So a lot of these statistics a lot of this information might sound familiar, which I found interesting, especially just as a start off. And then my other 2 get into different areas. But oftentimes she said that girls were often tricked into slavery. She's specifically talking about sex trafficking here. She went into identification was taken from them. Girls are isolated basically in emotional and physical means to isolate them, to make them more vulnerable, because if you're isolated, you're a better target, basically. She also she told me 2 different stories about 2 different girls. One was, there was one girl, she was going down for the weekend to do prostitution, to get some money. But when she got there, the textbook definition basically happened to her. Her identification was taken. They attempted to isolate her. Eventually, she was able to get contact with her parents, and they contacted the police, which then pinged her phone so they could find her. But it's one thing to read about, oh, this is what happens, this is the textbook definition, and then when I went and had someone reaffirm that, it was kind of like, oh, wow, it's really more than just a textbook saying these words, it's something. Another thing she talked about was, and she's a police officer, so this is to give you a little bit of, but she said they tried to watch the prostitute drop-offs because to see if basically someone dropped them off. And the reason being for that was they wanted to see if she had a pimp, basically, and if she did, they wanted to start building a case against them because they are the real target. Because I asked her what was the basic statistic of pimps to prostitutes that are gathered, basically, and it's 10%. And this is a rough estimate, 10% pimps to 90% of prostitutes were apprehended. And prostitutes, they are in violation of the law, and they are looking at it from a legal standpoint. Pimps are the mastermind. They are the individuals that are in the human trafficking. They are the ones taking girls and trafficking them. So the pimps are really the main goal to be apprehended, and it's with only 10% of them being apprehended. It's an interesting case in the sense that it's a hard hard battle. But we talked about juveniles for a little bit, and she went in how after the juveniles were taken into custody, they're handed over to DHS for recovery programs and whatnot. And across the board, something that she stated was another reason why pimps were so hard to take down and stop was because oftentimes the girls or whatnot were either afraid of them because court cases take a long time, so they were afraid of them, or the pimp was had previously been their boyfriend or whatnot, so they had some attachment to them. Okay, so I interviewed Sergeant Mitchell, which had come and spoke to us, and she offered a more, how do you handle such cases as this? And she's also in the police. So she talked about how you need to be as friendly as possible. And I think this reaffirms the fact of love being the solution. Because as this next line, judgment accomplishes nothing except makes your job as a policeman harder. And judgment in general in this aspect, in human trafficking, I think makes the job harder, makes the job of solving the issue harder, simply because it jades you, or if you're dealing with an individual, they could become closed off, and recovery could be affected by that. But showing compassion and love makes individuals overwhelmingly more cooperative. And that's the basic general consensus from her and through everyone that deals with it. That love and showing the person that you care about them is important. Okay, so Maya was an interesting person to interview. She was part of HEAT, which is Human Exploitation and Trafficking. And she really showed me, she wasn't with the police, but she handled a vast amount of different things that she did. As it says, she tried to organize different protocols. She coordinated billboards with billboard businesses to spread the word. She prints posters, hands them out. She does different training programs. She spreads the word through social media. She helps to publish books, which help the human trafficking aspect, and she does radio shows and more. But what I really got from Maya and what she made me realize and why I thought she was so important in my interviewing was that she is the one that made me realize that how huge human trafficking really was, in the sense of all the different lines you can go to helping to combat that. And all the evidence for how human trafficking was so big had already been there, but she was the main, basically the straw that broke the camel's back, in a sense. So she was really important to me for that. But that's it.
Can you tell us about what are the fields of Rwanda you mentioned?
Basically it's the human, the forced child soldier, basically. It dealt with brainwashing of children, it dealt with genocide, it dealt with a vast array of things, of sexual stuff. It was the Tutsi and Hutu that it involved, the two different people groups, Tutsi killing Hutu, and I felt like that was a really sad but amazing depiction of first really looking into human trafficking, because it basically encompassed everything. Especially how the author portrayed it. But yeah, so it was with the Hutu and Tutsi, and it showed the importance of humanizing people again. But I didn't answer your question.
Yeah, that's what I just wanted I wanted to know I'm not sure everybody is aware of what the conflict was about, why there was a killing field.
Yeah. So it's the invisible children.
But it was between two people groups fighting and committing genocide upon one another.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Thank you, Nathan.
Okay.